Thank you all for joining us for our August 2026 Bayou Culture gathering. I'd like to introduce our management team to all of you. My name is Jonathan Foray. I am the Executive Director of the South Louisiana Wetlands Discovery Center. We also have Dr. Rachel Doherty, who is over at the Center for Louisiana Studies at ULL, and she also represents the Louisiana Folklore Society. Maria Zarang is with us. She is the director of the Louisiana Folklife Program over at the Louisiana Division of the Arts, and Dr. Gary LaFleur, who is over at the Center for Bayou Studies at Nicholls State University. The staff of BCC includes Ms. Maida Owens, who is our senior program consultant, and Dr. Shauna Walton, our project coordinator. The reason why we hold these gatherings is because we think it is very important to include culture in planning. There are so many challenging issues that we face as residents of coastal Louisiana. We just want to make sure that culture has a seat at the table and we're able to share reasons why it's so important to keep culture at the forefront of those discussions. A big thank you to all of our funders. This program is brought to you by the National Endowment for the Arts, the M.J. Sindler Family Fund for Culture and Media, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development through the Division of the Arts, and the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. So a big thank you to our funders. I'd now like to pass this over to Miss Maria Zarang to talk about our artist spotlight.
Hey y'all. So for this artist spotlight, I wanted to talk about my time at the NSU Folk Festival in Natchitoches that Dr. Shane Rasmussen puts on. Um, and this is the Rakobu family who are from Fiji and now they live near the Fort Polk area in Louisiana. So they moved to Louisiana, of course, brought their culture and traditions with them. And they performed the Meke dance at the folk festival, and it was so cool. Um, and okay, so the Meke dance is the traditional dance of Fiji. Um, it combines dance, song, and storytelling. A lot of times when they're performing these, they are telling stories about local history, culture, legends, and just, daily life. Now, typically, men and women do perform the dance. And the wife and mother of the Rakobu family, she was there actually. But she was, oh, well, she's in this picture on the right. She's behind the stage. She was kind of providing some cultural context, and she decided not to perform and just kind of speak at the mic and talk about it. But women also participate. So this was really cool. First time Polynesian culture was represented at the folk festival. And so hopefully Shane and the Folklife program, we can do more with the Rakobu family. So just wanted to spotlight that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. Rachel?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, did they mention, and I don't know about Fiji, but it's interesting because Polynesian dance is part of the post-colonial French-speaking world. Y'all know I have a PhD in Francophone studies and I'm on the French internet. And so in French Polynesia, I see like footage of these competitions all the time. And so I've learned a little bit about this just from watching and about the different forms of storytelling. So this is really cool that this showed up in Louisiana for the first time being represented at the Natchitoches Folk Festival because there is this vague connection to the post-colonial French world.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, if we have time, I could say how they got there. If we have like 30 seconds.
30
Yeah.
seconds is yours.
Okay. Actually, Shane he's Mormon and he actually met them because the Mormon church is really big in Fiji and just Polynesia like at large. And the Rakobo family are Mormon themselves and they met at this cultural event that they were doing in Alexandria. And so actually I was talking to Shane about it this week, and he was just talking about how much how much Polynesian culture is like accepted in the Mormon kind of global church. So that's kind of how that connection was made in Louisiana.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that, Maria. All right. And so for our agenda today, we're going to hear a bit more from Mr. David Hubbell about Mirliton's that I'm looking forward to learning more about. We'll have a little bit of time for some questions. We'll ask him our question for this year through the theme of reclaiming the human connection. And then we'll have a few working group updates, some announcements, and then we hope that everybody will stick around from 1 o'clock to 1:30 for the informal discussion. So, very glad to have you with us today, David, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the things that I should be doing as I'm trying to grow Mirliton. So, he is presenting today mirliton.org, how restoring and preserving a cherished Louisiana heirloom is rebuilding community, culture, and connection. Thank you so much for being with us, David. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
I didn't think I did it, but all right, let's see. Is it gonna switch over automatically on share?
If you can, you'll have to take
Okay, I got
the,
it.
yeah,
There we go. Didn't, okay, here we go. And share. All right, y'all can see that yet?
it's coming up. Let's see. Yep, we got it. Thank you so much.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you all for having me for the Bayou Cultural Gathering this month. Meliton.org is the group that I'm representing here. And as let's see, make sure my items are going forward here. Hold on. Okay. There we go. How restoring and preserving our cherished Louisiana heirloom is rebuilding community culture and connection. A little bit more of my background. I'm from Louisiana historically or ancestrally, but I grew up in Texas, and I was born there, and now I live in Mobile for the last 40 years. But one of the things that was always interesting to me was finding my connection to my past. I think my parents moved right before I was born to Houston, and there was always kind of a longing to be back in Louisiana. And part of that outgrowth, I think, imparted in me my interest in genealogy. So I found out I have like 250 to 300 years of Louisiana German Acadian coast history. And then that was when I was really young. And of course, my other passion, so to speak, was that I like to eat good food. And my mom, being from Louisiana, was a good and is a good Louisiana cook. So when I got to a certain age, when I got married and my first child was on the way in 2002, I realized that in order for her to have these same experiences that I had, I probably need to step up to the cast iron pot, so to speak, and grab the spoon and learn to cook myself. Because my wife's from Germany and we have some wonderful German meals, and my mother lives about 30 minutes away. But for them to, and my second daughter now, to experience it, I really needed to learn some more about that culture. And in doing so, I came across all these recipes with all these different ingredients. And a lot of them I couldn't at the time get in Mobile. I can now, thanks to a certain grocery store, which I'm happy to have here. But I was not able to find them. So also around that time, we had moved into our current house and first house. And it was a previously established property with a landscaped yard that had some camellia shrubs and azaleas, but there was also a patch where there was a garden. And so my dad and grandfather always had gardens. And so just naturally, I was felt like, well, it's my turn to take up the reins and try to do that as well. And I started with vegetables and such. I grew it from the big box stores, tomatoes, cucumbers, and such. But I always felt like maybe there was something missing because I could always look at what my grandfather was growing and he had something totally different. And what I came to realize between that and those recipes is that the varieties I was growing were not the same kind that my River Parish cousins and family in Louisiana were growing. So I became real interested in trying to embark upon growing those here in Mobile. And luckily, the climate and a lot of the soil where I live is very similar. So I was started to focus on locating these type of fruits, or mostly vegetables, I should say, and things like the Creole tomatoes, green oval eggplants, Tabasco, excuse me, Jack Bay peas that are found up in the river parish, sugarcane, and then the Mirliton. So yeah, there's a lot of folks that may have heard of what is Mirliton or Mirlitons. There's a lot of different ways it's pronounced throughout Louisiana. And then when you get outside of Louisiana, there's a lot of butchering of the name as well. And the computer tends to turn it into melatonin. So there's that term, and then, but you may have not heard of Mirliton if you're outside the area, but you may have heard of chayote squash or coyote squash, how certain people pronounce it, or vegetable pear. So I'm going to give you a little background on what it is and some real quick tips on how to grow it. So it's part of the cucumber family, which is the same as the cucumbers, squash, and zucchini. And it's also prone to many of the same diseases and pests and insects that bother them as well. Although it's a little hardier, it's a spring and fall producing crop, say, versus a summer crop. The species is Sesum elju, excuse me. It's been a while since I took Latin. But some common names, as we already mentioned, are things like chayote, if you're in the Latin American countries. Vegetable pear, maybe some of the English-speaking countries. Christophine in the Caribbean areas. Chouchoute, I think is how it's pronounced in Jamaica, or choco in like Australia and New Zealand. So that kind of gives you an idea that Mirliton is all over the place. It's not just in Louisiana, but it grows very well from zone 8B and 8 to 11, and even in parts of zone 8. So you've already kind of seen some of what it looks like. You can see a little cartoon in the corner there that slides to, but it can be light green in color, or it can be dark green, or it can be even ivory white, which has become rarer to find. Shape-wise, as the term vegetable pear kind of alludes to, it's pear-shaped. It can be long pear-shaped, or maybe squat or snub-nosed. And it can be smooth-skinned, or have deep furrows, or even spikes. And so you get them, they're like 4 to 6 inches long, all the way to about 3 to 4 inch wide at the base. So you see to the left is an old heirloom variety from Louisiana with deep furrows. You see the store-bought kind that you typically see, the smooth skin, kind of short, almost globular in shape. This is the heirloom one that I grow in my yard here. This is been on the vine a little longer, so it starts getting those deep, craggly, beige-looking marks. And then you see some that have little spikes or a lot of spikes, and almost some that are very prickly. And then you have the rare ones, like the deeply furrowed ivory white. This is called the Israel Thibodeau variety, which I'll get into a little bit more. So it's a vining plant, and the vines can grow anywhere from 30 to 100 foot long. And so you need a lot of space for it to grow to a certain extent. It's perennial along the Gulf Coast, and an established vine can put on to 50 to 100 Mirliton fruit in a fall season, typically say beginning of October all the way through the end of December. Also in the spring, you might get a small crop on an established plant because since they come back, and I've got a vine that's 16 years old now, under the right conditions, you could produce total in the course of a year up to 350 Mirliton off of a vine. There have been some claims on the website or the Facebook page that somebody said, well, I've got over 1,000. That's probably highly unlikely, but they may have 1 or 2 vines that have grown closely together, and it may be kind of confusing. And here's what the vine looks like. You can see like a small Mirliton growing there. This is a picture of my trellis in my backyard. Unfortunately, it doesn't want to always grow on the trellis. It wants to grow toward the light, so it's on top of my citrus trees back there. You can easily pick several dozen at a time. And early on, you see, this is before I put a trellis up, kind of these heart-shaped leaves, and it just kind of call it like Cajun kudzu. So it's growing pretty much where it wants to grow, but you can train it and kind of contain it somewhat. Some brief information on nutrition. It is low calorie. It's a good source of vitamin B complex, moderate source of potassium, and it's an adequate source of antioxidants of vitamin C. And all parts of the melitong are really edible. In certain Asian cultures, people value the shoots. So the new shoots that come off of it, they do for stir fry. Other people value the root systems. It's got kind of shallow roots that spread out, but then there's also kind of a deep taproot. Other people, you can eat the seed. It's got a single seed in the middle almost, and you can roast it kind of like they do pumpkin seeds. But the fruit itself is what most folks in Louisiana go after. It's got a slightly sweet taste. Some say it could be like a little bit like a kind of a mellow squash or cucumber, nothing really strong. Some say it's got an insipid taste. Basically, it doesn't have any taste at all. But it tends to pair well with things that we have around the Gulf Coast, and we're lucky to have crab meat, shrimp, ground beef, ground pork, smoked meats, hams. They all pair well to make savory dishes. But it's also versatile enough that you can make sweets like melitong bread or pickled melitong. Historically speaking, it comes from the Mesoamerican and Caribbean areas. And we think it came to the Gulf Coast of Louisiana through a couple of couriers, possibly through the French, English, and the Spanish. And there's a big following and love for it in the cultures of the Isleños that came from the Canary Islands. A lot of histories claim that they brought it to Louisiana, but we haven't found as much information there that supports that, other than maybe you've heard that somebody had it on a ship's manifest. But they arrived in Louisiana around 1775 to 1783. But Dr. Lance Hill, who founded the melitong.org group, has done an extensive history, and there's a PDF document, I think it's 30 plus pages, on the history of melitong. And what he has found is that there's only two places in the world that use the term melitong, and that was Louisiana and Haiti. And if you know your Louisiana history, there is an Haiti and Louisiana are interlinked due to the Haitian Revolution and slave rebellion that occurred in the late 1700s. And during that time, between 1789 to 1815, there was a big influx of Haitian refugees that came to Louisiana. 15 to 20,000 is what I had read at one point. And about 80 to 90% of those settled in the New Orleans area. So I remember reading that like overnight, the population of New Orleans doubled. So back then, it was still kind of just an emergent port, but now all of a sudden it doubled. And one of the things you had that was a staple for the Haitians was the melitong as part of their meals. So it's believed that their influx, the name, and the love that has been shown upon that vegetable probably owes itself to the Haitians coming to New Orleans and Louisiana. And it's also believed that many of the varieties we have today that have adapted well to South Louisiana probably came with them. And you start seeing culinary references in the early to mid 1800s. There's journals, agricultural journals, talking about in 1847 eating melitong on a plantation along the Mississippi River in the Point Coupé parish. 1866, there's a newspaper article about a vegetable growing competition in which a gentleman, W.R. Prague from New Orleans, won the vegetable pear contest. And we've also heard that, from a lot of the old timers, that for years, early 20th century even, it wasn't really a kind of like crawfish. It was almost a poor person's food at the time. So it didn't really achieve a whole lot. It was very common, easy to find. So it didn't get venerated like some other rarities, or it probably didn't get marketed as such either, because it was pretty much ubiquitous. Let's see. So also you'll look in the newspapers and you'll see around 1875 to 1882, you'll find it listed mostly as vegetable pears, but of course that's kind of an English speaking papers by that time in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. But you'll start also to see melitong being used as like recipes or in articles, especially like in New Orleans in the early 20th century. And it's really a great food source for New Orleans if you think about how the homes and the properties and the Catholic tradition of the large families got a lot of mouths to feed, but you were maybe on a smaller amount of property. But if you could have this vine that could produce over 100 fruit, you could feed yourself and your family and many of your neighbors with very little cost because they just seem to grow and thrive easily in New Orleans. And as such, because it was a fall crop, you would see it in the Thanksgiving and Christmas times. So there's a lot of fond memories that people share where they have memories of their grandparents and such having it on the holiday tables. And you can see this is an article from the 1935 September 28th issue of the Times-Picayune, where they have many ways of serving Mirliton. You can see things like baked Mirliton, Mirliton salad deluxe, Mirliton à la Creole, and then even Mirliton fricassé or fricasseed Mirliton. So getting kind of back to my history with it, I was interested in growing it, but I had vague memories when I was like 4 or 5 when we'd visit Metairie, go to my mom's parents' house, we'd stay there, and either Thanksgiving or Christmas time, somebody talking about eating Mirliton with part of the meal, asking if I wanted some, and I found out what it was. And as a kid, I really wasn't interested in it because it was a vegetable and it was green. But my mom did try to grow it while we lived in Richardson, Texas, out near Dallas, and then also when we lived in Cypress, Texas, near Houston. And it grew for a while up until the freeze hit. And so as you can tell, it's not quite as tropical up there or subtropical as South Louisiana. And once again, my first attempt when I started to want to focus on my Louisiana variety or my Louisiana garden here in Mobile was to go and see where I could find one. And the nurseries and grocery store, well, the nurseries had them, did not have them, excuse me, but grocery stores had chayotes. So I found one that looked like what I remembered as a kid they should look like. And I sprouted it and I planted it and I got a beautiful vine. I finally got flowers around November as opposed to late September when you typically see them. And I finally got one about the size of a walnut. And I was kind of nursing it and watching it. And Thanksgiving Day, it was out there. Black Friday, I walked out the next morning out of my garage and it opened up to where my vine is and it was missing. The Mirliton was. I rushed over there and found it on the floor, mauled with teeth marks and claw marks. And what had happened is a squirrel got to it. So it was the opening volley between my battle with squirrels and Mirlitons for the last 15 years or so. But what I learned from around the same time was that this group Mirliton.org came online, and I was reading and found out that they had made a recommendation that to really be successful, you don't plant the ones from the grocery stores. You need to get the Louisiana heirloom varieties. So then I got on a quest to see where I could find those. And luck would have it, my mom was talking to her brother, and he happened to mention that my grandfather, who had just passed away, his lifelong friend, Dan Boudreau, who lived in Metairie, had been growing heirloom varieties for 4 or 5 decades. So we got 6 from him. And of those 6, 5 of them rotted away, but 1 survived. And we planted it at my father's house in Fairhope. And that first year, we ended up with 65 heirlooms, of which are 85 total. And I got 2 of them to sprout, and I ended up planting them in my yard in Mobile, where I still have one that's about 16 years old today. So you can see this is from that first day picking in my dad's yard. At the time, he told me, I think I see about 10 of them out there. So you start digging, start looking like, I call it like hunting for Easter eggs. And we ended up with 1.5 buckets of 65. And we cleaned them up and put them on the kitchen counter. So then we were faced with the problem of what are we going to do with all these Mirliton now that we've got so many. But it was a good thing to have. So some quick tips on growing them is that, the first thing is you got to have the right seed selection. And these certified Louisiana heirlooms, they're certified through Mirliton.org. And we'll tell you a little bit more. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But these are ones that have been proven to grow in Louisiana. You want to prepare it. The old timers would just simply sprout it, put it in a paper bag and put it in a cool, dark area and plant it in the spring. But through some other research, they found that if you pre-potted them in January, you have a chance for the roots to grow. The vine that forms off of it feeds off the fruit. And so what happens over time is that fruit will dry up and decay. And if you wait too long to plant it, you run the risk of the vine dying before you plant it. But if you put it in a pot and you let it sprout and you make a vine or a vining plant, now you've kind of got a 3-month head start on its growing, and then you can put it in the ground in April, and it's got a much better success rate at growing. So you've done a better growing technique and you've got the right variety. And also you want to make sure you plant it in a well-drained soil. Melitons don't like to get their feet wet, so to speak. The roots will rot and the fruit will rot early on. So you want to, if you see a lot of the old timers, they put them kind of on sloped ground, growing maybe near some trees that could maybe help absorb some of the extra moisture in the ground. You want it kind of in a partial sunny or to full sun area, but you got to be aware if you're in a full sun area, as you've already been talking about, August is brutal, and especially brutal on melitons. So we've also been discussing and using a lot of shade cloth for the last couple of years. With it has like a 40% protection rate, or eliminates some of the heat from the getting to the vine. And then what'll happen is if you're lucky, you'll get flowers in September. You'll pick between October and November and December, and then you want to protect it before the first freeze. You can either try to protect that 100 feet of vine with some visqueen or some other type of protection, or do like they've done for decades. You just cut it back to about 2 inches and cover it with straw or hay, and it'll keep growing. You protect it from any type of frost, any sudden deep frost that might hit and kill the plant. And it'll come back in April and May, and then you're off again. And even if it starts in May, or excuse me, even if it starts in April, you may have enough time to get a spring crop in. There are a couple of myths as well involved with growing it, and one of those is that you need a male and female plant, or plant or fruit. And there's no such thing. The spiky ones aren't male. There are male and female flowers on a single vine. Just like other cucurbits, the male is just going to be a simple flower, but the female is going to have a little fruit, in this case, a little meliton with a flower on the end. And so that's all you need is the one vine with that. When the fruit is pollinated, I guess technically it might be a female fruit, but it's not a male or female. There's just the one pollinated female flower that yields the fruit, and from that the sprouts go forward. And once again, the vines, there's no such thing as male or females. They both have the flowers. And you don't need more than one to produce melitons. It helps because you have more opportunity to pollinate, but I've had one vine for a number of years, and some years I've had over 100 grow, and sometimes due to weather conditions, I've only had maybe a handful. But that's really all you need. So now I'm going to move on to meliton.org. Got you the background on it, but what is actually meliton.org? Yeah, it originated kind of out of the devastation of Katrina, like a lot of things did. There was a lot of people, as you know, we've talked about in New Orleans growing these heirloom varieties. But with the floods that came, and I think meliton vines can handle maybe about 24 to 48 hours of being flooded. But beyond that, the roots end up dying. And so a lot of these heirlooms disappeared. And so people tried to replant, buying them from the grocery store, which was successful. You could do back, say, in the 50s and 60s, when that was your only source for local melitons. But when they planted them, a lot of them were coming from Costa Rica or Mexico. And much like I discovered, they don't flower till November instead of September. And they are grown up in on the mountainsides about 4,000 feet versus at the ground level. So they're a different variety. And with that realization, they realized that they needed to find if anybody was still growing the heirloom varieties. And this ignited an interest or a charge from a certain individual, a New Orleanian, a transplant from Kansas, Dr. Lance Hill, and his picture's down there. And Dr. Hill, professor at Tulane, he's not a botanist or biologist by training, but he came and taught at Tulane, and one of the first things that happened, he was living in Algiers, and a neighbor came to introduce himself. And when the neighbor came, he ended up with an old paper sack full of meliton. And so that was his introduction to the meliton. And I think he was enamored with it. He grew it for a number of years. And what he finally discovered is that, he couldn't find any heirlooms to grow afterwards, and nobody had them in New Orleans. So as he kept looking and searching, he realized what had happened. And so he found a few people that maybe outside environment, maybe Metairie might have had a few, but some of the neighboring parishes had them. So he came up with a plan for the Adopt a Melitol program where people would either donate or he bought them. He sprouted them. He got them to growers, and the only thing that the grower had to promise is that they would return, say, 10% back to the Adopt a Melitol program. And that went to feed the next group of growers with the same thing. And within about 3 years, he was able to really help provide New Orleans with a lot of the heirlooms again. And that became kind of the purpose of the group, was to restore heirloom melitons in Louisiana to their former glory. And at that time, he was even able to start realizing that just because you see the ones in the grocery stores, they all kind of look the same, but when you really start studying them, there was at least 9 distinct varieties that he had come across, different colors, shades, shapes, and furrows. And they were all distinct enough that he just ended up saying, well, whoever's growing it, you can name it. So that's why you got a lot of names like Israel Thibodeau, the gentleman who was growing it. Mine from Mr. Boudreau, who also got some from was sharing it with one of my great uncles. I named it the Boudreau Robert variety. So we've got those names, but since then we've even found another 7 or more. But there's a number of varieties that were lost due to Katrina. But these resources that he put together in his pursuits, he put it online with this website. So he's got several articles and blog posts that he created on growing, on history, and then even international recipes he collected. And then he also formed a group of trusted growers that helped him in the endeavor. So some projects that came out of finding of the group, of course, like I said, was naming and categorizing, as well as giving out and making them available to other growers. The one that we really are very proud of is this Israel Thibodeau White Melitol Preservation Project, because that one was grown by a gentleman, Mr. Israel Thibodeau, outside of Opelousas, who grew it for 40 years. It's rare, white, deeply furrowed, and he passed away in 2013, but not before he passed on a sackful to Dr. Hill to distribute to other growers. And what Dr. Hill did is he got them out to people who were interested in growing them, and kind of the Adopt a Melitol program all over again. One of those was Chef John Folse in Baton Rouge, and the other was, one of the other ones was me. I did not have as much success with that one. The plants I tried did not survive. But Chef Folse ended up with very good yields. And so he grew a number of the vines at his White Oak Estate and Gardens in Baton Rouge, and really was featuring them and became a real advocate for it. Well, that was great until 2016, when many of you remember the big flood that happened in Baton Rouge. That killed all his melitol plants. And around that time, he and I had communicated. I had actually done a little radio show with him on some things. And as we were communicating, I found one gentleman who was growing them outside of Lafayette. So he sent his gardener out there, and his gardener purchased 5, and they brought them back to the White Oak Estates. And he planted them, and they did well for a number of years. But by 2020, just on the cusp or the beginning of the pandemic, he was down to 1 vine. So he's looking for more. And it turned out that when he asked me if I knew of anybody who was growing them, and I started searching, and Dr. Hill started searching, we said, Chef, I think you've got the last vine left of this Israel Thibodeau, which kind of sparked the 3 of us realizing we needed to do something. And as such, we created a more in-depth Adopt a Melitol program, but we took ones that Chef John was able to propagate and grow that following fall, and found growers to basically reseed and preserve these. And since the program lasted about 3 years, to the point where now there's so many vines, I think at last count I had, we had 15 growers, and I think we're way beyond that now, who are preserving these white melitons that go back to Israel Thibodeau. So we had a real success with just this kind of grassroots effort. And it's a nonprofit group, by the way, so a lot of this is being done. There's a few folks who've given us funds over the years. But the website also has some things, some blog posts. I did a few on some historical growers in New Orleans. And there's a video series that folks might find interesting, because as we talk about, there's various ways people pronounce Mirliton. So he was thinking, Dr. Hill was, could we come up with ways that maybe people would go capture people how they say Mirliton. And I thought, well, let's not just do that. Let's see if we can get some native Louisianians that might be a little higher uh, celebrity status than just the regular folks. Although now TikTok kind of defeats that. But we found folks like musician John Boutte, a couple of chefs, Chef Marcel Bienvenu, Chef Frank Brightson, Vance Fokerson and his wife Julie in New Orleans, Don Dubuque, outdoors guy, and Miss Louisiana. They all volunteered to do videos for us. So it was like 90-second videos that they sent me, and I kind of basically put a front and tail end on it, and I got them up on a YouTube channel. So you can see how 31 people through South Louisiana pronounce the term or the word Mirliton. And of course, like I said, we've continued to collect that large repository of recipes. So that was how we settled for a number of years. But then we really started to develop an online community with moving it to Facebook. He had been looking and searching Facebook for a number of years and always trying to get more information on who was growing it. And we realized that the field work, is kind of limited. You can do the academics and you can go out to one or two people in the field. But what ends up happening is that you realize that you can only do so much of that. But Facebook kind of lets you do it instantaneously. So we started a group on April 15th, 2022, and we were up to 15.9 thousand members since that time. And we have a group statement. We're science-based for people trying to grow or want to grow Mirliton in the U.S. And we welcome the sharing of knowledge, experience, techniques, and questions. And we're trying to preserve the unique culture by, once again, protecting the adapted Louisiana Mirlitons before they disappear, the heirloom varieties, sharing and recording stories, growing family traditions, local history, and such. The foodways, trying to keep that alive and encouraging seed sharing and backyard growing and gathering. And I'm trying to finish up because I know it's going a little long, but we're also restoring the human connection using technology, because in the past, to get these Mirlitons, you either just simply could find maybe ads in the newspapers or go to your local nurseries in Louisiana, or even when local groceries or farmers market carried the heirlooms, or you knew somebody, you could just simply go and find that. But what happened over time is that those connections, those interested growers disappeared, and a lot of people took it for granted that they'd always be there. But we first helped out primarily by putting classified ads on the website. But now with Facebook, we're able to have growers say, hey, I'm in Opelousas and I want to grow some of these. Anybody got any available for sale? I'm in Mobile. I've got somebody who wants to grow them. So we've got networks going from Texas to Florida and even from Georgia all the way up to the Carolinas. Mostly in the coastal areas that they do better. So hopefully we're helping restore the human connection by preserving these heirlooms, connecting growers, cooks, historians, and neighbors, both online, and then the human in-person connection when you go to meet those people, when you bring them the plants. There's some mailing available, but we don't really encourage it because not everybody's set up to do it. But by doing this in person, you actually get to meet people that are growing it, and now you have a network locally. Once again, we're teaching the practical growing knowledge and sharing it across generations, because people didn't learn from the grandparents or parents. There's a lot of things I wish I could go back and find out from my grandparents now, 30 plus years after they're gone. And of course, the sharing. So we're hoping the legacy of Mirliton.org is going to ensure that the greatest harvest is not just the fruit from the vine, but that the community that grows from around it. So I was trying to squeeze that into 30-ish minutes, but I've got a lot of information on my YouTube channel, David J. Hubbell. Got those videos. I've done a weekly during the fall season for the last 5 years of what my vine is doing week to week. So if you're really interested in seeing that, I try to impart some lessons of things we see, different pests and other things. Got some recipes that I've cooked on there. Of course, the mothership is Mirliton.org website. There you find all those resources, the PDFs and such. And then the Facebook page is really kind of where the community comes together. I have my Mirliton Man of Mobile page, but really the Facebook group, Mirliton.org, is really where folks are discussing and making connections And especially when you post a recipe around the fall, hey, recipe, please, can you please share, how I can make that? And you can email me if you have any questions after this, or you see it in the replay at rpcajun2r@gmail.com. And I want to thank y'all. And before we, willing to answer some questions, but I got a QR code that you can scan there, and that'll lead you to the playlist of all the How Do You Say Mirliton videos. So I'll take.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us, David. I really do appreciate that because I have like I mentioned earlier, a little vine that I'm trying to start and experimenting with it myself. One of the things that I just want to share before we open it up to questions is how beautiful what you're doing is. And I'll share a little bit of the, this organization and the work that we do is very much about how to keep traditions moving forward, how to maintain your traditions when you may not be able to live in the place that you grew up. And what's amazing about what you've done is you've moved to a different place, but you're able to remain those cultural connections that you longed for. You figured out a way to keep them connected, and not only to keep them connected, but how to share them with your children and to establish that connection. And so I think that's a very important part of what it is that you shared with us. We've talked about a trunk of traditions, like if you had to leave from a coastal area because of sea level rise and land loss, what would the traditions be that you would want to put in that trunk that future generations would be able to take with them? And I would have not ever thought of Molitons in my trunk of traditions, but you have put them in there. And so I greatly appreciate that. So,
Thank you.
um, from anyone in the audience, we have enough time maybe for one or two questions. And then, of course, we'll continue the conversation at 1 o'clock. But anyone with any questions? Because if not, I have another one. All right. Well, it's going to be me. Oh, Honora, real quick. I still have a question that I'm interested in. Honora?
Yeah, yeah. I just had put one in the chat, but I was just curious. Has anybody done any DNA analyses or any other kind of chemical analyses to show relationships or distinctions between these different varieties, as well as relationships to the other, you know, not types
Right.
that aren't from here?
Our group hasn't. Dr. Hill has reached out to, I think there's a lot of more of the foreign countries. I can't remember if it's like Singapore or something, but there's a couple of the real academic studies, but I'm not sure that they've actually done some in-depth DNA. He's mentioned that that would be the way that you could really even further, there's some that we look at just based off of physical traits. And oftentimes the more we look at it, and he really studies it a lot more than I am because he's retired now. But he can say, well, this is similar to this one and similar to this one, but I can't say it's distinctive enough. So we just call a lot of those just Louisiana heirlooms without really giving them a name. But to your point, yeah, that would be something that would, if there's somebody interested, I'm not aware of any in-depth studies, but that would be a way that we could possibly pare down and distinctively say that this is what makes this one a little different than the rest of them, and distinguish them.
Yeah, that's something that's the cost and ability to do that type of work has come way down and do taxonomic distinctions, et cetera, or sometimes even just not even DNA, but some of the other chemical components sometimes
Right.
are enough. But
Cool. My question is, you mentioned seeds. Um, every time that I've seen a Moliton propagated, it was with the entire fruit, and the plant had started, and then the entire fruit was placed in
Correct.
the dirt, sort of like halfway in, halfway out, maybe at a little
Right.
angle a bit. Is
That's
that the
right.
proper way to do it, or can you like harvest the seeds from the Moliton and just start it off with a seed?
We've had some, so I guess in the interest of just not so much being traditional, but in the interest of knowing what worked, a lot of times what we found is that, it sprouts, as you said, there's a single seed in there. It's a big kind of almost like a flat almond, but it's huge. And what happens is that it'll sprout and it'll feed off of that fruit, and then the roots will come out of it. And what they found is that when people have experimented and carefully extracted it, and even put it in really proper potting soil. In fact, I had somebody send me one time and I tried it. I did have a vine that started and the vine grew outside of the fruit. The only problem is it's like, I'm going to say it has maybe a higher mortality rate than, say, growing it the traditional way, the way you described it. And I don't know whether, there's, with a lot of us being amateur growers and having kind of limited amounts, when you kind of get a hold of a Mirliton, it's going and growing, sometimes it's either just want to get it to keep going as opposed to maybe really digging deeper into, their different alternative ways. People have also, to that point, tried taking cuttings and starting it like that. And we've had some, Chef Folse had a gardener there at White Oak that he and his wife took a cutting, and I think maybe using perlite was able to get a root started, but I'm not sure how successful it was as far as getting to full maturity. But the way that you described it is the way that I guess you see it in nature. They'll just kind of fall off the vines and they'll kind of land. And it seems like as long as I bury mine probably about a couple of inches in at that angle, like you're talking about. But we've had growers that'll just simply place it on top of a surface of dirt just so that the roots can go in there. So there's probably room for more experiments with it. But like I said, the traditional way it's been a high success rate doing it the way you described.
Nice. Thank you for that. Um, the next thing we would like and you kind of responded a little bit to this in your presentation toward the end, but can you share with us one strategy that we can use to reclaim human connection, or go further a little bit into what you had spoken of in your presentation?
Well, one example that I can think of is in Mobile, and I work at a chemical plant about an hour north of Mobile. And the place I'm at now, everybody likes to eat. And so when they found out, I've been working there about 5 years now, and when I left the other job, I had really kind of gotten into doing more of the volunteer work with Mirliton.org. And I decided I'd put that on my resume. And so it was kind of interesting is that I actually got 2 interview questions. With the first interview, one of the HR people asked me, well, what exactly is this group in Mirliton? So I was like, okay, well, you kind of like lobbing me a softball there. So I did that. And then when I had an on-site interview with a lot of the folks, one of the gentlemen that I work with, turns out he married a girl from Thibodeau. And he's like, how can I get one of these Mirlitons? And so I said, well, I think I can set you up. And this was before I got the job, but I gave him a few. But the thing I think that works a lot is just since we like to eat, oftentimes I've introduced them to some of the dishes. So I'll bring in something. They'll see I'm friends with a lot of them on Facebook, so I'll post a picture of a stuffed Mirliton. They'll ask, well, what is that? So I brought in some, when Rouse's had them 10 for $1, since I didn't have enough of my own at that point, is I made a smoked boudin stuffed Mirliton and brought it in. And I got quite a few people interested in eating it and finding out about it. So we kind of made a human connection, and you can do that not just at the workplace, but other places, maybe by just offering food, and maybe when it's something unique, have an opportunity to tell them about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you got me hungry. And I hope people are going to stick around, because that's another thing that I want to talk about after 1 o'clock is some favorite Mirliton recipes. So thank you again, David, for being with us. And thank you for sharing all of that. Here is our BCC group schedule for the French language preservation group, protecting collections, cultural and coastal planning, and preparing receiving communities. So if you're interested in any of those topics, you can get in touch with us, and we can put you in touch with the conveners of those groups. We'd also like to invite all of you to join us for our next gathering, which will be Friday, September 18th, again at noon. We will have Kyle Crosby with us, who is a historian, filmmaker, speaker, tour guide, and founder of Louisiana Dread. So if you're on Facebook, definitely check out the things that Kyle's been posting. It's all of interest. So we hope that you have enjoyed being with us for this hour, and we hope that you'll stick around for the informal sharing that's coming up. So thank you again, and that concludes our presentation for today.